delighted to introduce today my good friend and my ex-internal medicine doctor, Dr. Joe Feuerstein, born in England, trained in medicine at the University of London and also business management at Cambridge. He completed a surgery internship in Israel and served as a combat physician in the Israeli Navy, achieving the rank of captain. After moving to the USA 20 years ago, he completed a family medicine residency at Columbia University and Stanford Hospital, where he was chief resident. He spent 2 years in a fellowship in integrative medicine under Dr. Andrew Weil at the University of Arizona. He then directed Stanford Hospital's integrative medicine program for 14 years, focusing on chronic conditions using a variety of treatments. Currently, Dr. Joe Feuerstein is a medical instructor at Greenwich Hospital and an assistant professor of clinical medicine at Columbia University. He is also certified, as if it weren't enough, in medical acupuncture and clinical hypnosis and holds a homeopathic license in Connecticut. So welcome, Dr. Joe.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Doctor.
Lovely to see you again. So let's kick right off with a big question. What inspired you to pursue a career in medicine?
So I'm kind of a person of faith and religion, and I very much believe in purpose. And so my understanding of my life is that you are created by the Creator in order to do something. That is literally, your life is a life of service. In fact, to quote, I'm actually Jewish, but I'm going to quote Sir Benedict. He says that your work is your prayer, and ora et labora in Latin. And so, to answer the question, I knew when I was 10 that I was going to be a doctor, and there was just nothing else, because there was nothing else I was going to do. It was a little bit of a bumpy road along the way because I kind of wasn't working particularly hard, and that doesn't help if you want to get into a British medical school. Dr. Rhodes, you'll know that. So I had to up my game, but I always knew that was what I was going to do, and it is literally a life of service. This is how I serve the world.
I love that. That is a wonderful thing to hear. And I think many people go into medicine for those reasons too. And it's what makes it so important that we nurture this profession. These are usually really wonderful people who have a higher mission who are going into medicine. And so, we need them to be happy and healthy and thriving and not stressed and unwell. So Thank you for sharing that.
Wow.
So tell me, you mentioned it was a sometimes rocky pathway. Did you have any challenges during your medical training or your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
These are very good questions. So the first thing is, in my CV, you will notice that I went off to study business administration. And so in England, you do an undergraduate degree and you do medical school. It's a bit like some of the programs you have in the States where you can do medical school in 7 years, which includes your undergraduate and also med school. There are lots of institutions that do that as a fast track. And so when I was in essentially my 6th year, I decided, and this was really after not having that much interaction with patients. I mean, when you're doing clinical, you're seeing patients, but they're not your patients. They're somebody else's patients. You are duly noting and writing, the notes, etc., and coming out with stuff, but you don't have ownership of any of the patients as a medical student in the United Kingdom. And so I decided that I was going to go into hospital administration. You don't know this, but this was what I was going to do. So I traded my med school that I was going to leave, and I was going to go do business administration at Cambridge. And so I did that. And two things happened. One is that I kind of had a better understanding of how, if you want to be successful in your career, you have to actually have a plan. This is one of the only things I remember from business school. I don't remember much about marketing or accounting, but I do remember a tip to the younger physicians that if you want to be successful, you need to have a 3 and a 5 year plan, just like a business. But the other thing was that I realized was that I actually really liked being a doctor. So taking a medical degree and then disappearing into pharmaceuticals or disappearing into the world of hospital administration when you really hadn't used any of your medical education was not a good plan. So I duly went back, finished, and then I went into clinical medicine, and I've been since 25 years. But it wasn't rocky. Wow. It was just the fact that I had an idea. Oh, wait a second. Maybe I should be, I don't know, you're probably going to remember this, but in the 1990s in the UK, all of these big, massive teaching hospitals became independent, and they needed administrators to administrate. And so they wanted one of their own. So I was going to go off to business school, and then they were just going to throw me in there, and eventually I would be, the head of a trust. But what a waste of medical school.
I couldn't agree more. And it's funny, I don't know, Dr. Joe, if you know this, the viewers probably don't, but I did a similar thing. I went off to be a public health doctor, and, which would have meant I would have been working for a hospital trust doing research and basically being an administrator who rationed care, who rationed services. Yeah. And I actually really loved it. I loved it intellectually. I find it very, very interesting. But I think for both of us, it maybe would have been a bit of a waste of our talents. And
right. Or my, the passion I have, because if it's a service, and that's not that that's not a service, but I didn't feel that was the service for which I was created.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, you are an amazing clinician, so I'm
so glad thank you very much. I'll pay you later.
Thank you. So is there a piece of advice that you wish you'd received early on in your medical career?
The way I'm going to look at that is the way what I said to my eldest daughter was flirting with the idea of going into medicine. I don't think she's going to do that. She's actually going to go off and do a PhD in neuroscience. Not important, but the point was that having not gone through the system and understanding, it's a really long slog. It really is. And this concept of delayed gratification, the people who go into medicine generally are bright. We could do a lot of other things that would make more financial sense, essentially, 10 years before what you're actually, the time you actually start getting paid a respectful salary. I don't mean to be rude, but really a respectful salary as a physician with a certain amount of education is probably a decade after most of your friends, if you've studied hard and you've gone to good schools, have already been out in the business world. And it's a long slog, and you really need to know why you are doing this, because there's years of, I'm a morning lark. I'm not a night owl, so I wake up early. I spent probably 6 years of med school, or 7 altogether, getting up probably at 5 o'clock in the morning to study, because that's the best time for me to study, just in terms of my circadian rhythm. But the point was that there's a level of just plain slogging, and then you did that for residency, and I did it in residency in Israel and in here, and then you do your fellowship. It's a long way. Just know why you are in this, and it needs to be a good reason, because it's going to have to hold you through really tough times.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that strong sense of higher purpose is extremely important. This is not this is not an easy career path. I was telling I have 2 young adult sons. I was telling them the other day that I used to go to parties in my 20s when I was a junior doctor equivalent of residency in the States. And I used to look for the coat pile and fall asleep on it. And my then boyfriend, now husband, used to kind of come and find me at the end of the party, and I'd be found fast asleep in a pile of coats.
That's good, but that's exactly. Look, there is a sacrifice to this. There's no question, but there's also such an incredible reward, not necessarily particularly financially, because we could all probably make money faster and probably more doing other things, but just in terms of what we actually do, impact into our communities, society, to the world. There is no other job that does that. And I don't just mean for physicians, I mean anyone in the healthcare setting. What we do is literally holy.
I agree. My mom used to say to me, this was when I was a teenager, she used to say, what better job is there than saving lives for a living?
Right.
And so she was so right. That is wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Joe. Yes, it's this is not for the faint of heart.
No, this is just, it's a marathon, and that's it. And listen, if you want it, then you can do it, providing you have enough memory, etc. And you can do that. You also need to understand what type of person you are, and then decide which plants of medicine is your fit. But there's a place for everybody. But as long as we remember why you're doing it, because that's the reason why. The ones who are burnt out, who I've got colleagues now who are probably 20 years younger than me, who have a couple of years out of residency, they're new attendings, and they're already, some of them, getting burnt out, which concerns me, because you have a long way to go. So you need to figure out, what is this that makes you happy? What gives you the satisfaction? And the rest of it, you just have to it's got to blow in the wind. Families can be difficult. My family can be difficult. So, but you have to still remember that the key here, the most important thing, is your patients.
Agreed. Yeah. Wonderful. So tell me, you are still in the medical profession now. How do you think the medical profession has changed since you joined it? And what do you see are the kind of current problems facing the medical profession today?
Most of my practicing career was in the United States, apart from the time I was in Israel, my residency and my internship and training in the Army. That aside, so I can mostly speak to the United States. Well, firstly, a couple of things have happened. I've been involved, just as a tangent, with organized medicines. So the County Medical Association, the State Medical Association, I've been involved with them on their board, on the board of trustees, etc., for many, many years, because at physicians, I realized that there are lots of practitioners, but just in terms of physicians, we are a tribe, and we have to essentially try and look out for each other. What has changed is the nature of practice for 70 or 80% of physicians in the United States. You would come out, you would join a practice. It would be private. You would fight the insurance companies, etc., and that's what you would do. And now 80% of doctors coming out, especially in primary care specialties, are going to join a large medical group and be employees. They are not going to be, leading their own way and creating their own practice. Some of the subspecialists may do that. They'll usually do that in groups. But that is a massive change from when I first started, because when I first started, that was not the same. We didn't have these large, massive groups. And I work twice a week for a large group, for a large, big system. And I have no problem because they pay my health insurance, etc. But I understand the limitations of what that means. It was funny because what you learn in the armed forces is that you are in a hierarchy and stick in your hierarchy. Do not sit there and try and undermine your superior officer. You are expected to do certain things. It isn't that different in one of these systems. And as long as you can do that, patient care above all, but there are going to be ways that is totally different to older physicians who would have spent their entire careers doing it their way.
That's really interesting. It's funny. I'm trained in a type of behavioral assessment called the DISC assessment, and there's many assessments like that. And included in it is an assessment of the motivators, and it's really interesting. I think, a lot of people in medicine are highly individualistic people, and they tend to make good entrepreneurs. I'm now an entrepreneur, and I coach entrepreneurs and physicians as well. And I think that highly individualistic streak is great for entrepreneurship, but not necessarily so great for being in a hierarchy, as you say.
Which is where it is today. So they should have come out 20 years ago, and then they could have done it. And the Sinatra, I did it my way, is not going to work when you are in a large system. The system I work with in Connecticut has 30,000 employees.
Wow.
I hope, a valued employee, one that they care about, but I am an employee of an organization in the same way as I am a captain in the Navy, I was, and therefore I have someone who's my superior officer, and it is an order, it is not a suggestion.
Yeah, very interesting. I hadn't thought about that change. Thank you for sharing that. It's super interesting. So tell me, I'm sure that you experienced some stress in your life as everybody does. So tell us, what do you do to help manage the stresses and strains of being a doctor and also of being a father and leading a busy life?
Yeah. Firstly, stress management is a key component of integrative medicine. Hopefully, we're going to talk a little bit about integrative medicine, and I'll explain what that is. But one of the fundamental building blocks of integrative medicine is going to be stress management and mind-body approaches. And so for almost 15 years, I saw 45,000 patients when I was working as the director of integrative medicine at Stanford. It's, by the way, one of the largest centers in terms of volumes in the country. And so we saw a lot of patients. And I instructed everybody I asked about their stress, and then I asked about their stress management and whether they needed help. And I am answering the question. I'm just giving you context. And the irony was that during my time there, I had complete lack of balance in my life. And I was telling everyone, it was incredibly hypocritical. It really is, do what I say, certainly don't do what I do, because what I was doing was working 5 to 6 days a week and seeing all of these patients, etc. And I very much can see how someone would get burnt out, even if you are doing this because you believe that this is for a higher purpose and this is your calling, etc. You still get burnt out because there's just so much volume. And so I took a pivot to essentially get my life into a more balanced way. And so I do a little bit of work at the hospital. I teach. I do some television. I've got some books. I work with some supplement companies. I put that together, and that together allows, I've got a little private practice. All of those things together allow me financial security to be able to support me, my family, and give me balance. So what did I do? I bought a dog. Well, I actually adopted a dog who's a rescue. I'm kind of into rescues more than, the foofy ones. So, and I walked there with my wife. It was an adoption fair, and my wife sees this dog and she goes, "Oh, that's your dog." That was it. It wasn't. You know how when you know. Yeah. So this is how I am with things. It took me seconds to realize this was my wife. This is going to be my house. This is obviously my dog. It was very simple because it was with God's hand. So I just realized, oh, that is obviously my dog. It isn't anybody else's dog. That's why it wasn't adopted by anybody else, because it was for me. That was the way it was always supposed to be. Let me just get this, So I walk with my dog 2 to 3 miles a day. Obviously that's not specifically for exercise, but I'm walking outside. It's the Connecticut countryside. You know what that is? It's beautiful and sunny, and off I go. And yes, I might listen to podcasts because in my field, it's important to kind of keep up to date with whatever's going on with the microbiome or whatever it is. Or I might be talking to my mother in Israel or whatever it is. But every day I am outside in nature for 45 minutes. And that is absolutely a stress management piece. There's 2 others. Tai Chi, which I do want to... everything I organize, it's very funny because if I in my schedule, there's always a reason why I'll do something. It's never, there's always, like somebody said, oh, can you do this at this time? It's yes, I can. But there's a specific reason why I work on a Wednesday. Do you know what I mean? And the reason is because I have Tai Chi and I have yoga. I've been doing Tai Chi and yoga for probably, I don't know, nearly 20 years. So I've been doing it a long, long time. And that is my moving meditation. I try to meditate. I've done a lot of different types of meditation, including, transcendental meditation and mindfulness. But because I'm very high energy, Tai Chi and yoga are going to allow me to express. But for that hour, I am present. I am not looking at my phone. I am there and I'm good. And so that's what I do. I walk my dog in nature, and then obviously I work out like everybody else, like we should. I do lots of exercise. But that's not. The exercise is because I want to stay alive as long as I can. Mm-hmm. Stress management is more thoughtful in terms of moving meditation in nature with your doggy, who I love.
Oh, that is wonderful. What a great role model you are.
Thank you. So get a dog, people. Get a dog. Don't get like one of these she ones. Just get a rescue.
No fancy dog necessary. Absolutely. So tell me, Dr. Joe, you mentioned about integrative medicine. Tell us why you went into that field, and perhaps throw in some top tips from. You've already given some, but some top tips from what you've learned from your career in integrative medicine.
Absolutely. So how I got there is relatively straightforward. Finished my residency, worked for a federally qualified health center for a year, which was great, straight out of residency. Firstly, it's a really useful thing to do because, and this is now getting towards, 17, 18 years ago, you don't have an opportunity to refer to an entire referral network when you're working with the underserved, because a lot of the people, the consultants you would work with, aren't going to take their insurance. So you end up being the orthopedic, you're not going to be the orthopedic surgeon, but you end up doing a lot more workups than necessarily you would if you were just in a kind of more affluent primary care area where there's lots of consultants. You're just basically going to, oh, you got this, didn't work, off you go. That's it. You work people up. You work people up a lot. That was great. And that was a nice way to start and get clinical experience. But what became very apparent to me was that the expectation of how I was to treat patients was not in their best interest in terms of service. The quicker I got you out of the room by giving you a prescription, the quicker I could see the next patient. And I'm not being anti, I'm just telling you the way it was. Yeah. And that isn't the way it should be. And so I always was interested in more natural approaches. And then I did my fellowship. And after that, I literally never did primary care again. I went straight into integrative medicine because most of those medicines that I gave people, I would not usually give them now. I could probably fix their problem without any medicine at all, which is what integrative medicine is essentially. It's to use natural approaches. So can I use a pharmaceutical? Sure. When do I use a pharmaceutical? Unless it's an acute problem that I need something done right now. If it is a chronic problem, that's probably the last thing I'm going to do when nothing else works. And that was the opposite of what I did when I was working with the underserved. It's sad. I'd love to work with the underserved again. I might work with some First Nation people. And again, it's the idea that you are treating them with lifestyle, which has a myriad of more effects than just I give you a pill to fix one problem, because it's just going to fix that one problem. So the lifestyle is how you eat. Is very simple. How you eat, how you move, how you deal with stress, and how you sleep. It does not matter what medical problem you have. If you work on those 4 fundamental pillars, then even if I'm not going to cure your problem because it's incurable, I guarantee you will get better in some way, in some fashion, and sometimes miraculously better. And that's the nicest thing about integrative medicine, which is that fundamentally, everyone's a little better after they meet us. We always improve health.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And I think, in our busy modern lives, people they don't listen to their bodies anymore. They don't have the time, or they don't even have the tools to listen to their bodies and to do the simple things. And when I was a general practitioner in the UK, which was similar to what you were describing, we used to see 40 to 60 patients in a day. It was just brutal. There was no quality to that care, and like you said, it was just what's the quickest pill that could get this person out of the room, and it was not good care looking back on it. So I think
can do better.
Yeah,
anybody can do better. It can't just be that's awful. It's just awful. I'm sorry, it's awful.
I know, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. Integrative medicine hadn't been invented in the UK when I was still working there, and I think it's amazing how much it's growing and spreading, and I think it really has changed the medical profession. There are still, I think there are still a fair amount of doctors who are not embracing it, and I just don't really understand why. And it stands to reason that if you help your body, then it is going to help you be healthy. And
so to that, what I'll say is, when I first started, I was introduced to the medical staff. It was not a pleasant experience. I think it was after my fellowship, and they honestly thought I was going to do craziness. And again, I explained to the medical staff that fundamentally, I'm going to work on sleeping, eating, movement, and stress management. And if I use any herbs, they will have evidence, and I will send you a note with the evidence for them. And if I use acupuncture, it's because there's evidence for that. And if I use, hypnosis or meditation, it's because there's evidence for that, because it's evidence-based. And it took years. By the end, our center I was predominantly, the patients I saw were referred by other doctors. It wasn't people walking in. You couldn't get in to see me. It had to be referred by another doctor. And the irony was that the naysayers were the ones who referred by the end, because they realized that we didn't just hang out. I don't need to, people who've got better things to do than hang out. You know what I mean? They're coming because they need me to do something, and the patients are referred because they can't take a medicine, won't take a medicine, or they already took the medicine. It didn't work. So now what are you going to do? So now you're going to see us. And I think that the younger physicians have no issue with this at all. They get it. They understand that this is part of, it's interesting. Nurses per se, about 80% of them actually do alternative modalities themselves. There's a huge movement with the nurses to this, and a lot of integrated nursing colleagues that I know.
That's very cool. Good to know. There's definitely a sea change occurring. You can feel it, and long may that continue for sure. So before we finish up, Dr. Joe, please share with us 3 top tips for physicians and for everybody. Let's not be selective here. What are your 3 top tips on being healthy?
I was cheating. Get a rescue dog. Walk the rescue dog. This is all one, by the way. Get the rescue. This is all part of the same package. You see, I'm sneaky. Get a rescue dog that you have to walk in nature. Okay, so that was 1, which is actually 3. Generally, in terms of your nutrition, don't eat for 2 hours before you get up. Try and stop eating a couple of hours before you go to sleep. Eat your carbs in the morning. Don't eat carbs at night. Eat protein and vegetables at night. And you have to move, which everybody knows. But movement means strength training, balance training, and aerobics.
Love it.
That was a lot. I'm sorry. I totally cheated.
You're very sneaky.
I love
it.
Hard, but the point is that that's actually how, and then you'll thrive. And that's it.
Love it. So before we finish up, Dr.
Yeah.
Joe, is there anything that you're working on right now that you'd like to tell our audience about?
I'm going to very briefly say, so I've got this TV show that I do once a week. It's on the Word Network, which is the largest faith-based African-American television network in the world. And a lot of what I talk about is the microbiome. I have this thing, I've written a couple of books with a celebrity chef, and our next book is on the microbiome. And I'm about to start a project with some of the largest cancer centers in the country, looking at how we can modulate the microbiome in order to hopefully have some effect on early stage prostate cancer. So that's academically what I do, and I'm teaching, etc. So that's all good. My passion project is the following. In fellowship, this is a very quick story. In fellowship, there's this part, I've never done this ever again, but there was 50 doctors in the room and nurse practitioners, and we had to, as part of disclosure, we had to write a letter to a patient that we had unfinished business with. Mm. And then you had to read it. And it was without a doubt the most emotional thing I've ever had for physicians. People were crying everywhere because it's actually an opportunity to take what we see and what we've done and put it out there with our colleagues. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is laughter. So, I already spoke to you about this. You have introduced me to a very funny professional comedian who does stand-up called Elaine. And what I am hoping to do, I'm actually stealing from the teachers. I was listening to the radio and they had all these teachers who essentially put together a little kind of comedy troupe, and they go and they do improv, and most of the audience are teachers, and it's kind of teacher-specific, but it's very funny. I want to do the same thing with interested parties, nurse practitioners and physicians and medical students, etc., who want to just try a 3 or 5 minute stand-up routine because it's actually therapeutically important. Laughter is one of the ways we can get some of this incredible heaviness off our chest. I want to do it for physician wellness. I also have, frankly, if you think about all the hospitals, they always have Christmas benefits and they always like having a band. They'd love to have some funny doctors doing this spiel. So if you're interested, and Leo or any of your audience, then how do they connect with me?
So we will be sharing all of your information below the podcast in the notes.
Spectacular. So I want to put it together. It would be a online little class, and then we'd actually have to go somewhere and try it out and get good. But if we get reasonably good, that'd be very nice. And there's a lot of hospitals, so, you can make a little dance. It's a little cute thing, but it's more to do with the fact we have to laugh some of the time. It cannot always be heavy. So writing letters is one thing, and crying, but also laughter.
I love that idea. It's absolutely brilliant. And I think there's probably some really cool stories out there as well that need to be shared.
100%.
I can think of many from my own career, and to be able to look back on those dark moments with laughter is very beneficial. Good therapy for sure. Absolutely. I love that. So as I said, we'll be sharing the contact information for Dr. Joe below the show notes. So please connect with him. He is an amazing guy who I'm really honored to know personally. And also professionally. So thank you so much, Dr. Joe, for being my guest today. It has been an absolute pleasure. And thank you all for tuning in today. And I would like to wish you all much health, happiness, and abundance. Bye for now.
Thanks so much.